The social cognitive view of motivation. Social cognitive theorists such as Albert Bandura, Dave Shunk, and Barry Zimmerman emphasize two factors that strongly influence motivation to learn: the models to which people are exposed and people's sense of self-efficacy, or how capable they believe they are to handle a particular task. Power of persuasive models. One factor that positively affects students' self-efficacy and motivation to learn certain behaviors is the opportunity to see other people exhibiting those behaviors and to observe the consequences that occur. Social cognitive theorists refer to this as observation, imitation, and vicarious reinforcement. As we pointed out in discussing social cognitive theory in an earlier chapter, vicarious reinforcement means that we expect to receive the same reinforcer that we see someone else getting for exhibiting a particular behavior. A student who observes an older brother or sister reaping benefits from earning high grades may strive to do the same with the expectation of experiencing the same or similar benefits. A student who notices that a classmate receives praise from the teacher after acting in a certain way may decide to imitate such behavior to win similar rewards. A student who identifies with and admires a teacher may work hard partly to please the admired individual and partly to try to become like that individual. Both vicarious reinforcement and direct reinforcement can raise an individual's sense of self-efficacy for a particular task, which may in turn lead to higher levels of motivation. The importance of self-efficacy. An individual's sense of self-efficacy can affect a motivation to learn through its influence on the learning goal one chooses, the outcome one expects, and the reasons or attributions one gives to explain successes and failures. Choice of learning goal. Analyses of learning goals suggest that a student may choose a task mastery goal, a performance approach goal, a performance avoidance goal, or a combination of task mastery and performance approach goals. Task mastery goals involve doing what is necessary to learn meaningfully the information and skills that have been assigned. Students with high levels of self-efficacy choose this goal more often than do students with low levels of self-efficacy. In pursuit of task mastery goals, students with high efficacy will use a variety of encoding techniques, do more organizing of information to make it meaningful, review and practice more frequently, monitor their understanding more closely, formulate more effective learning strategies, and treat mistakes as part of learning. Performance approach goals involve demonstrating to teachers and peers one's superior intellectual ability by outperforming most others in class. If the best way to accomplish this goal is to do assignments neatly and exactly according to directions, or to memorize large amounts of information to get a high grade on a test without necessarily understanding the ideas or how they relate to one another, then these tactics will be used. But if a high grade can be accomplished only by using more sophisticated and meaningful learning tactics, then those will be used. Students who adopt performance approach goals often do well on tests, but they are less likely than students who adopt mastery goals to develop a strong interest in various subjects. Although students who choose performance approach goals tend to have high levels of self-efficacy that may decrease over time if they are repeatedly subject to classroom environment that stresses high test scores at the expense of subject mastery. I feel like I missed a verb in there. Performance avoidance goals involve reducing the possibility of failure so as not to appear less capable than other students. Students can reduce their chances of failure by avoiding novel and challenging tasks or by cheating. They can also engage in self-handicapping behaviors, such as putting off homework or projects until the last minute, studying superficially for an exam, and getting involved in many in-school and out-of-school non-academic activities. The purpose of self-handicapping is to be able to blame poor performance on the circumstances rather than on one's ability. Students most likely to choose performance avoidance goals are boys with those with low grades and low academic self-efficacy. Teachers may unwittingly encourage self-handicapping behaviors even in students whose sense of self-efficacy is at least adequate by using a normed reference grading system. Because students are compared with one another to determine the top, middle, and low grades, this system encourages students to attribute their grades to a fixed ability. Students who have doubts about their ability are then more likely to engage in self-handicapping behaviors. Outcome expectations. A second way in which self-efficacy can affect motivation is in terms of the outcomes that students expect. Those with high levels of self-efficacy more often expect a positive outcome. As a result, they tend to be more willing to use the more complex and time-consuming learning skills and to persist longer in the face of difficulties. It is possible, however, for a student to have a relatively high level of self-efficacy but expect a relatively low grade on a test because the student believes the teacher is prejudiced or grades unfairly. Those with lower levels of self-efficacy are more likely to expect a disappointing outcome, tend to use simpler learning skills, and are likely to give up more quickly when tasks demand greater cognitive efforts. Attributions. A third way in which self-efficacy influences motivation is through the reasons students cite to explain why they succeed or failed at a task. Those with a high level of self-efficacy for a subject are likely to attribute failure to insufficient effort and so vow to work harder the next time, but credit their success to a combination of ability and effort. Their peers who are lower in self-efficacy are likely to explain their failures by saying that they just don't have the ability to do well, but they will chalk their successes up to an easy task or luck. As we point out a bit further on in this chapter, this latter attribution pattern undercuts motivation. Other cognitive views of motivation. In addition to social cognitive theorists, researchers who take other cognitive approaches to learning have done extensive studies of motivation. The views described in this section emphasize how the following 5 characteristics affect student intrinsic motivation to learn. The inherent need to construct an organized and logically consistent knowledge base, one's expectations for successfully completing a task, the factors that one believes account for success and failure, one's beliefs about the nature of cognitive ability, and one's interests. You should also be aware that intrinsic motivation for school learning is fairly well developed by about 9 years of age, 4th grade, and becomes increasingly stable through late adolescence. Thus, it is important to develop intrinsic motivation in students in the primary grades as well as to identify students with low levels of academic motivation. Cognitive development and the need for conceptual organization. The cognitive development view is based on Jean Piaget's principles of equilibration, assimilation, accommodation, and schema formation, which we discussed in the chapter on stage theories of development. Piaget proposes that children possess an inherent desire to maintain a sense of organization and balance in their conception of the world, equilibration. A sense of equilibration may be experienced if a child assimilates a new experience by relating it to an existing scheme, or the child may accommodate by modifying an existing scheme if the new experience is too different. In addition, individuals will repeatedly use new schemes because of an inherent desire to master their environment. This explains why young children can, with no loss of enthusiasm, sing the same song, tell the same story, and play the same game over and over, and why they repeatedly open and shut doors to rooms and cupboards with no apparent purpose. It also explains why older children take great delight in collecting and organizing almost everything they can get their hands on, and why adolescents who have begun to attain formal operational thinking will argue incessantly about all the unfairness in the world and how it can be eliminated. The need for achievement. Have you ever decided to take on a moderately difficult task, such as taking a course on astronomy, even though you are a history major and have only a limited background in science, and then found out that you had somewhat conflicting feelings about it? On the one hand, you felt eager to start the course, confident that you would be pleased with your performance, but on the other hand, you felt also a little bit of anxiety because of the small possibility of failure. Now try to imagine the opposite situation. In reaction to a suggestion to take a course outside your major, you refuse because the probability of failure seems great, whereas the probability of success seems quite small. In 1964, John Atkinson proposed that such differences in achievement behavior are due to differences in something called the need for achievement. Individuals with a high need for achievement have a stronger expectation of success than they do a fear of failure for most tasks, and therefore anticipate a feeling of pride in accomplishment. When given a choice, high-need achievers seek out moderately challenging tasks because they offer an optimal balance between challenge and expected success. By contrast, individuals with a low need for achievement avoid such tasks because their fear of failure greatly outweighs their expectation of success, and they therefore anticipate feelings of shame. When faced with a choice, they typically choose either relatively easy tasks because the probability of success is high, or very difficult tasks because there is no shame in failing to achieve a lofty goal. Atkinson's theory was an early version of what it is currently called expectancy value theory. An individual's level of motivation for a particular task is governed by that person's expectation of success and the value placed on that success. Atkinson's point about taking fear of failure into account in arranging learning experiences has been made by William Glasser in Choice Theory in the Classroom and the Quality School. Glasser argues that for people to succeed at life in general, they must first experience success in one important aspect of their lives. For most children, that one important part should be school. Erik Erikson made the same point by maintaining that the primary psychosocial task for school-aged children is to successfully resolve the issue of industry versus inferiority. Explanations of success and failure, attribution theory. Some interesting aspects of success and failure are revealed when students are asked to explain why they did or did not do well on some task. The four most commonly given reasons stress ability, effort, task difficulty, and luck. To explain a low score on a math test, for example, different students might make the following statements. I just have a poor head for numbers, lack of ability. I didn't really study for the exam, lack of effort. That test was the toughest I've ever taken, task difficulty. I guessed wrong about which sections of the book to study, luck. Because students attribute success or failure to the factors just listed, research of this type contributes to what is referred to as attribution theory. We have discussed this topic in self-efficacy sections. Students with long histories of academic failure and a weak need for achievement typically attribute their success to easy questions or luck, and their failures to lack of ability. Ability is a stable attribution. That is, people expect its effect on achievement to be pretty much the same from one task to another, whereas task difficulty and luck are both external attributions. In other words, people feel they have little control over their occurrence. Research has shown that stable attributions, particularly concerning ability, lead to expectations of future success or failure, and that internal attributions, those under personal control, lead to pride in achievement or to shame following failure. Because low achieving students attribute failure to low ability, they see future failure, as more likely than future success. In addition, ascribing success to factors beyond one's control diminishes the possibility of taking pride in achievement and placing a high value on rewards. Consequently, satisfactory achievement and reward may have little effect on the failure-avoiding strategies that poorly performing students have developed over the years. Success-oriented students, high-need achievers, in contrast, typically attribute success to ability and effort, and failure to insufficient effort. Consequently, failure does not diminish expectancy of success, feelings of competence, or reward attractiveness for these students. They simply resolve to work harder in the future. This attribution pattern holds even for academically gifted students who might be expected to focus on ability because they excel at most tasks and are well aware of their superior capabilities. Citing effort as a factor in their success or failure is thought to be more motivating than citing just ability, because effort is a modifiable factor that allows one to feel in control of one's destiny. The typical attribution pattern of high-achieving students highlights an important point. Both effort and ability should be credited with contributing to one's success. Students who attribute their success mostly to effort may conclude that they have a low level of ability because they have to work harder to achieve the same level of performance as others. Pause and reflect. What percentage of your behavior do you think stems from intrinsic motivation, from extrinsic motivation? Is it possible to change this ratio? How? Pause and reflect. Do you fit the pattern of most successful students, attributing success to effort, and ability and failure to lack of effort? Yes. If so, how did you get this way? Is there anything you can draw from your own experiences to help students develop this pattern? Beliefs about the nature of cognitive ability. Children's motivation for learning is affected by their beliefs about the nature of ability. During the primary and elementary grades, children create and refine their conception of ability. By the time they reach middle school, most children start to think of themselves and others as belonging to particular categories in terms of ability. Changes in beliefs about ability. According to Carol Dweck, a leading theorist and researcher on this subject, noticeable changes in children's ability conceptions occur at 2 points: between 7 and 8 years of age and between 10 and 12 years of age. Compared with kindergarten and early primary grade children, 7 and 8-year-olds are more likely to do the following: show an increased interest in the concept of ability and take greater notice of peer behaviors that are relevant to achievement comparisons. Distinguish ability from such other characteristics as social skills, likability, and physical skills, and believe that the same person can have different levels of ability for different academic skills, such as reading, writing, and mathematics. Think of ability as a more internal and less observable characteristic that is defined normatively, that is, by comparing oneself to others. Think of ability as a characteristic that is stable over time and can therefore be used to make predictions about future academic performance. Engage in self-criticism related to ability and compare their performance with that of others. Compared with 7 and 8-year-olds, 10 to 12-year-old children are more likely to do the following: distinguish between effort and ability as factors in performance. Consequently, some are more likely to say of 2 students who received the same grade on a test or assignment that the one who exerted more effort has less ability. Evaluate their academic ability by more accurately, although more begin to understand their ability. Think of ability as being both a stable characteristic and a fixed capacity that enables the grades they currently receive. that explains the grades they currently receive and will receive in the future. It is not uncommon to hear older children and adolescents talk about peers who do or do not have it. Consequently, students who believe their ability in a particular subject is below average seek to avoid additional courses in that subject. Girls, especially high-achieving ones, are more likely than boys to adopt this view of ability, and this may partly explain their greater reluctance to take advanced science and math classes in high school. Value performance goals, getting the highest grade possible, over learning goals, making meaningful connections among ideas, and how they relate to the world outside of school. Why these changes occur and why they occur in some individuals but not others is not entirely known, but comparing the performance of a student with the performance of every other student in a class to determine who gets grades, the practice of grading on the curve that we mentioned earlier, is suspected of playing a major role. One casualty of this belief, as we've indicated, is motivation for learning. Types of beliefs about ability. According to the work of Dweck and others, students can be placed into one of three categories based on their beliefs about the nature of cognitive ability. Entity theorists. Some students subscribe solely to what is called an entity theory. They talk about intelligence as if it were a thing or an entity that has fixed characteristics. Incremental theorists. Other students subscribe solely to what is called an incremental theory, believing that intelligence can be improved gradually by degrees or increments as they refine their thinking skills and acquire new ones. Entity and incremental theorists hold to their respective views for all subjects. Mixed theorists. Students in this group subscribe to both entity and incremental theories, depending on the subject. A mixed theorist may, for example, be an entity theorist for math, but an incremental theorist for science, whereas the opposite or some other pattern may prevail for another student. Students with incremental beliefs tend to be motivated to acquire new and more effective cognitive skills and are said to have mastery goals. They seek challenging tasks and do not give up easily because they see obstacles as a natural part of the learning process. They often tell themselves what adults have told them for years. Think carefully, pay attention, and try to recall useful information that you learned earlier. They seem to focus on the questions, how do you do this? And what can I learn from this? Errors are seen as opportunities for useful feedback. Not surprisingly, they are more likely than entity theorists to attribute failure to insufficient effort and ineffective learning skills. Students who believe that intelligence is an unchangeable entity are primarily motivated to appear smart to others by getting high grades and praise, and by avoiding low grades, criticism, and shame. Such students are said to have performance goals. When confronted with a new task, their initial thought is likely to be, am I smart enough to do this? They may forego opportunities to learn new ideas and skills if they think they will become confused and make mistakes, and they tend to attribute failure to low ability rather than insufficient effort. However, among students who subscribe to the entity theory, there is a difference between those with high confidence in their ability and those with low confidence. High confidence entity theorists are likely to demonstrate such mastery-oriented behaviors as seeking challenges and persisting in the face of difficulty. Those with low confidence, in contrast, may be more interested in avoiding failure and criticism, even after achieving initial success, than in continuing to be positively reinforced for outperforming others. Because of their anxiety over the possibility of failure, these low-confidence entity theorists are less likely than students who have an incremental view of ability to exhibit subsequent motivation for a task. If avoidance is not possible, they become discouraged at the first sign of difficulty. This, in turn, produces anxiety, ineffective problem solving, and withdrawal from the task as a way to avoid concluding that one lacks ability and thereby maintain some self-esteem. According to attribution theory, entity theorists should continue this pattern because success is not attributed to effort, but failure is attributed to low ability.